Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're actually watching this. Welcome to another episode of Hypnosis Week. And indeed, this week, I am delighted and privileged to be able to share an interview with you that we're about to do right now with Dr. William D. Horton. And that's Horton, not spelt the way my wife is, which is Houdhton. People get them mixed up. My wife goes crazy, and I'm sure William would the other way around. William is world renowned as being an addiction specialist, particularly with reference to drug and alcohol abuse, but other substances as well. He's won arguably more awards than pretty much any other living hypnotherapist or psychological therapist out there. And I'm going to let him explain more about all this stuff in a minute. But one thing I do want to mention is that he hasn't just worked with people I would call lay people on the street with these issues. He's actually been regarded within his niche as being leading in the field enough that he's been pulled into psychiatric units, prison rehabilitation units, to help people on that's the real hard edge of substance abuse. So I'd like to welcome to the show, William Horton. Good day, sir.
Hi, good day. It's good to be here. And I always love talking to people on this subject, addictions and or hypnosis and the NLP. And it's good to get the word out and share the information.
Excellent. Well, I noticed that you run, I believe you run, because it certainly comes up, it gives that impression on the website, the National Federation of NLP, is that right?
Yeah, I started that in the early 90s because I broke with the way a lot of the NLP trainings were being done. Because you don't know it, neuro-linguistic programming, which is how you think, not why. And we'll do a demo of that later if you want. And but you know, one of the things about that technology, we talk about how it makes things faster, more effective, and easier to do. And yet back in the 80s, I noticed they kept making the trainings longer, more complicated, more convoluted. And I'm like, well, let's go back to the basics. And so kind of like I follow the martial arts, which is, it doesn't matter, that you get your black belt unless you keep studying. And so I that's my analogy for hypnosis and NLP trainings. I can train you how to do it pretty quick. If you do not practice, you will not be very good. It's kind of like a guy that gets his black belt or girl at 18, never trains. She's not going to be a martial artist. And I see that in our field. So anyway, going back to why I started in F NLP, I make it fast. I decided to do a very fast, effective, focused training on NLP that people can use. Not a lot of theory, not a lot of dogma, and I know the people sitting in the room, and I'll shut up with this, they're not to hear me talk about all these other subjects. They're paying me to learn hypnosis or NLP. That's what I'm going to teach them. So I cut out days of the program. So I just ended up developing this organization, which is, I think, the second largest out there and the second longest continuous one run by the same people.
Cool. So you said the others were like more and more adding stuff, and yeah, I'm very aware of what you mean. So what would you, in terms of if someone's coming to you from scratch for what people generally term the initial practitioner training, which I know, for example, and I'm going to mention names, I am, you don't have to, any backlash is on me. I accept full responsibilities. I do every week on this show. I noticed, for example, that Bandler will drag his practitioner training 7 days, but then you're dragged into this cult of doing your master prac, your advanced master prac, your trainers, and at the end of it, it sadly seems to me that too many people just end up then going out there once they paid those thousands of pounds, done the trainer's trainer, and start running their own courses when they've never actually done anything in the real world.
Yeah, that's true for a lot of them. And, I had a friend say for years he thought NLP and somewhat hypnosis was basically like a multi-level marketing scam. We get you in the basics, then we sell you the master, then we sell you the trainer. Now we tell you, go get your friends and train them. Kind of like how Amway says, come and become a distributor and then go sell all this crap to their friend. And you haven't had the hands-on skill of actually doing it, right? And I see that a lot with trainers. It's kind of like to use, and I've got a doctorate in clinical psychology. I'm a psychologist. And it's kind of like the difference between someone that's going to teach you psychology that's had a private practice versus the guy or girl that goes to college, gets their undergraduate, their graduate, their doctorate, and then they become a psych professor. They don't have experience. And I see that in the NLP world, especially even more than the hypnosis world, but I see it there, where you could tell because the trainer, God love them, they love hypnosis and NLP, but you could tell they don't have a lot of experience. So they're telling their trainer's story. They're telling other stories that, like, this is not how I did it. You know, somebody asked a question. So, you know, how would you handle someone that has a little bit of bipolar issue with addictions? Well, if the person's never dealt with it, they're going to say, I don't know, most of them will just make stuff up. And if you've had the experience, you could talk about the experience. And so, yeah, and so I see that where people just take the training and then they're pushed into being trainers. And lately, my big push in the hypnosis and NLP world is we've lost the what's the word I want? We've lost the respect for people that just want to have a nice little, right? Somebody wants to, you know, work in their office, whether it's full-time or part-time, and really help other people. It's kind of like, and also our field has been driven the last 20 years, to be honest with you, by internet, right? Guys that are internet marketers, then they learn the hypnosis and NLP, and then, you know, it's like you always hear me say, there's somebody, they take their training today, but they're a good internet marketer. You look at their website 6 months from now, I've been in this business 25 and I in this, and it starts pushing the idea that, well, if I'm going to have a practice, then the next thing I have to do is I have to have this internet marketing business where I'm going to sell this and I'm going to sell that and I'm going to sell this. What if they just want to actually help people stop smoking, lose weight, improve their games, that respect? And excuse me, but I get on a tire.
Hey, no, hey, please go for it.
It's, well, yeah, well, it's kind of like my friend's a medical doctor, one of my friends, and you know, he's a doctor. He doesn't want to go build this internet marketing empire. He's a doctor. He likes helping people. And I also, from the psych world, I see it where they respect and admire, that's the word I want, people that are just going to set up a nice little practice and help people change. And sometimes when you go to our conferences, you know, we've lost that. It's almost, oh no, I got to be on the road, you know, 20 days a month doing trainings, or I'm not real, because that's what some people choose to do. So anyway, going back to the how the NLP world got hijacked. But one thing I have noticed in the last 10 years because of the internet, back in the 90s, NLP trainings were about 21 to 28 days. Now they're down to mine's about 4 or 5, Bandler's is 7, and most people had to condense their trainings because of the way people can get information.
Yeah. Well, it's partly that. I think also in terms of a lot of NLP courses, certainly the longer ones, there's so much stuff in them. And here I won't mention names out of fairness, but I have attended as a guest at numerous different people's courses, some famous names, some not. And it's all well and good if it's being marketed to the corporate arena for team building, interpersonal development, all that kind of stuff. But if your desire is to learn how to help people overcome habits, addictions, fears, phobias, or whatever, the vast majority of it's bullshit that's of no real use in the therapy consulting room, in my opinion.
Oh, no, yeah, and also there's different little genres. I would say genres. You can tell I also act, but you know, I like EFT, right? I like EFT. I like EMDR, right? But that really, to me, should not be part of an NLP training. It's a different subset. I mean, it's another reason why some of the trainings get more and more convoluted. because they're bringing in things to me that aren't, NLP. And there's one, and some people, there's a couple people, they'll do a 7-day NLP training that includes a hypnosis training, which I think is kind of interesting, right? Because then I don't know how they do it. I've never been to their class, but I'm like, interesting, right? So they bring in things that aren't useful if you want to be a practitioner. And to me, an NLP practitioner, much like a basic hypnosis practitioner, means you should be trained to be able to sit across from somebody, move toward their goals, whether it's stop smoking, lose weight, improve their golf game, work with an addiction. And also to this issue, I slam our industry about, which is, I can fix everything, just come see me, right? And you don't see that in the medical or the psychological or the social work field. Like, I don't work with kids. I just don't work with kids. It's not my specialty. Not that I couldn't. It's just I will refer you to someone that works with children, right? Mm-hmm. So I, for a while we were starting to see that in the NLP hypnosis world, and I hope it makes a so where bring out to someone, like if I knew you and you really like working with kids, why don't I refer them to you, because you know what you're doing. I get a lot of people that refer addictions to me because that's how I got in this field. That's what I've done for 35 years, over 35 years. It's kind of like I'm the default guy where hypnotists, NLPers, and therapists, if they have an addiction problem, they end up calling me.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, if the viewers were to go on Amazon, for example, and type in William Horton, and Horton's Horton, and do a search on Amazon, they'll see that you have got tons of books out there. Now, they are mainly to do with addictions and substance abuse and solutions to that. But I also noticed, interestingly, you've got a couple that are more theme-wise, at least, out there under mind control.
You mean like this? Yeah, well, and it actually, it comes from, there's a lot of people, they want to learn hypnosis or NLP because they have an interest in, and there's, when I say the term mind control, some people could go off on a tangent, but it's just a word. But, they want to figure out how people really think. And for some people, they'll default to the idea of mind control. And, it's just like psychology, and psychiatry. There's all the research, it's easy to look up, that 50% of the people that become psychologists or psychiatrists go into the field because they think there's something wrong with them, and they think getting this education will fit them. I argue it's even higher in the NLP and the hypnosis, right? That people come into a class because there's something wrong with them. They don't want to go to a therapist. They think, I'll take this training, right? And it will fix. If it's a competent trainer that understands that really, a lot of room is here for self-development, and you can kind of figure out which people are, so you can help them get what they want. And then the people that really want to become like practitioners, you can help them get what. And so I have the book Mind Control because I find it fascinating that how do you get people to take action? How do you get people to take action in their best interest, where you don't really know sometimes that you're helping, or they don't know that you're helping them, right? Which is like, some people would call it like covert hypnosis or waking hypnosis, which is all marketing, And so, I love those topics. The one that gets me is like, I had an article I wrote and kind of turned it into a little book, and it was basically, secrets of the cult leader. That one got a lot of attention. Yeah, and it, and it's like, okay, but I think it's good information to have, so you see it happening in the real world. And God knows right now, I'm not going to get political, but we're seeing it in a lot of the political where, you know, they're not just politicians. Basically, they're cult leaders in my country and, dare I say, your country.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Let's be honest. What's the difference between and if people are seeing this in years to come, to put some historical context, today we're recording this on the 13th of January 2020. So you can always Google search if you're watching this in decades to come. But what's the difference between Donald Trump, the current president of America, and Boris Johnson, the current Prime Minister of England? And do I mean that as a joke or as a question? Either way, the answer, frankly, is I think just the accent. The bubbles, like you say, it is so cultish now.
Well, and you know, I forget what the from, because usually I take an idea, give credit, and tweak it a little bit. And this one, you know, there's like and when you look, we'll just talk about that a little bit, like in what Boris Yeltsin's done in the UK is the same thing Donald Trump did here. And a little bit going back, Barack Obama did it in 2008, which is they follow a 5-step program, you know, how to get people to do this. Number one is you encourage their dream, you know, and you figure out who your target is. The other thing is Boris is good in your country, Trump is good here, and was good back to Clinton. You know, all the good leaders, they know that's their target. They don't worry, you know, white males primarily, you know, much like Boris was, you know, so that's his target. He's not worried about the far left because, you know, he didn't care. So what you do is you have your target and you go, well, what's their pain? And then you encourage their dreams. You dream of a life like your dad had. You dream of bringing back those old industries. You know, I saw Trump do this brilliantly, like, we'll bring back coal. Well, no, coal's dead. You know, we'll bring back the auto jobs. No, and it's not immigrants taking the jobs. It's robots, you know, but yet he fed that dream. And then he justified it's not your fault. So it's justify their failure. It's not your fault. So it takes and it's not my fault, right? It's not your fault you didn't learn about robots and become right? Or you didn't move out of West Virginia where the coal mines have been dying for 35 years. But so you justify you justify that it's not their fault. Then you confirm their suspicions and you blame it on another group, whether it's immigrants, which they're doing both of our countries, young people, you know, anybody that don't look like, right? And then you say, I'm like, you know, I've been there. And that's one thing I can never figure out with a platinum spoon, right? The man takes a crap on a gold toilet. And he's got these guys in West Virginia living in a trailer going, he's just like us, you know? And I know I've seen that, you know, in your country with Boris, it's like all these dock workers, he's just like us. Yeah, I don't think so. You know?
Yeah, precisely.
But so, so then they have a common enemy. So when they sell them on those points, you know, encourage their dreams, justify their failures, confirm their suspicions, allay their fears, I'm like you, and then you've created a common enemy, they'll follow you. And then once they buy in, they don't want to leave. Even when they're presented evidence, it's like, this guy's not what you think. Or that's why I like, and I think people should learn this kind of stuff. Because when you see it, it's fascinating, whether it's a political thing or a social movement. You know, and just think about all the industries that know how to create these cult-like things, whether it's Harley Davidson here in my country, you know, our guys are a special group, right? Mm-hmm. Apple Computer, yeah, you know, the people that will never wear Wrangler jeans, they'll only wear Levi's, right? They're jeans. And yet, so, you know, I just think this stuff is fascinating. That's why I write those things, you know. So it's fascinating fascinating to me.
I do believe, Law, that actually does kind of, you were saying, you know, even when they end up getting presented with evidence that what they came to believe or manipulated to believe is wrong, that they won't face up to it and accept it. As we call that in, well, as you know, I'm just saying this for the listeners who may not know, in psychology, that's called cognitive dissonance. The idea that to accept that evidence would mean they'd have to admit to themselves they were fooled and deceived in the first place. And that could be very painful and bad for the ego and the self-esteem. So rather than that, they'd sooner argue and dismiss it and find excuses why that new evidence isn't true, or just plainly ignore it, rather than have to face up to that short-term pain of, I got fooled, I got suckered in. Now, I'm going to make a statement now, and you please do disagree with me. Do not be nice for the sake of it, okay? That's not what this podcast is about. This is about your truthful, genuine opinions. But my opinion, and I've nowhere near as much hands-on direct experience of treating people with addictions as you have. Yes, I've been in hypnosis 30 years, but I do other stuff as well, whereas you are mainly addiction man. So, but my conclusion is this, that in theory, I believe somebody could wake up in the morning who was formerly a cocaine habit, addiction, you know, and say to themselves, enough's enough, I'm not going to touch it anymore. And that is all they would need to do pretty much, and they would never have to touch it again. Unfortunately, at some point, somebody who knew them as, in this case, let's say Jonathan Royal, former cocaine addict from the early to mid 90s, which by the way isn't hypothetical, that's true, it's in my autobiography. May have woken up one day and gone, enough's enough. I may be earning mega money doing all these shows in England and TV stuff, but I'm spending as much, if not more, on the celebrity lifestyle, drinking, cocaine, and all this, that, the other. And I just went, enough's enough. And it was like a wake-up call. And I thought, we're not going to bleep this out, but I thought, fuck it. I don't care what people think about me. I didn't care when I was doing the drugs, so why the fuck should I care if I stop? So I did stop, but I did encounter, and this is why I came to this conclusion, and it's how I approach clients, is that I think that they could sort themselves out as quickly as that. But at some point, they would bump into someone who knew them when they had the addiction. Whether it was a family member who didn't approve or someone from the circle that joined in with it, and they'd go, I notice you're not taking cocaine anymore. Or you're not drinking, you know, as much whiskey as you did, or whatever it may be, or you're not smoking anymore. And the person would go, well, no, I woke up one day, I decided not to touch it anymore, and I haven't since. To which that person, especially if it was a family member who didn't approve, was going to go, Jonathan, in my case, why the fucking hell didn't you just do that sooner then? If it was that easy to stop, why didn't you bloody do it? And there is no logical, rational answer to that. So sooner or later, the person would feel bad about having stopped, and that would cause to remove themselves from that pain of, I'm getting attacked for having stopped now and not doing it sooner. They would relapse, as we call it, so that they could prove it wasn't that easy to stop. So when they bump into that person again, they no longer feel attacked. They go, look, I'm sorry, but I've gone back to it and it wasn't as easy as I thought. Whereas if they go and see a therapist like yourself, and go through an important seeming ritualistic process, whether that's hypnotherapy, tapping themselves on the face, acupuncture, it doesn't matter. It's got to be an important seeming ritualistic process from a credible, perceived authority figure, ideally an expert in a particular field rather than someone who says they're a jack of all trades. Then it becomes even more believable. They go through that and they leave. When they bump into that family member, in this scenario, the family member goes, I notice you're not taking drugs, or you look better, you're not drinking alcohol, whatever it may be, or you haven't, we've been stood here an hour talking, you've not lit up a cigarette. They can go, I've stopped. And when the person goes, well, why didn't you do it sooner then? They can go, oh, I've tried, but it wasn't until I saw this expert, William Horton. or Jonathan Royal or whoever, and had to have this process done that then I was given the tools to be able to. And the person then can't be attacked. So it's like an invisible force field, a shield for them to give them permission to change. And I genuinely believe that the biggest thing we do as therapists is give people an environment to change, permission to change, and kind of a safety shield for to stop themselves from relapsing, because they can't be attacked by people for not having done it sooner because they hadn't got the help from you or me or someone else before. What do you make of that?
No, that makes sense, because when you look at psychology and when they study things, one of the things that's always been fascinating when you look at like psychological, especially a placebo, is 30% of the, for most placebos are about 30. There's about like this 30% effective. And let's say like Xanax is only 38 or 40%. So it's only an 8% difference, right? Of course, the difference is the placebo doesn't have side effects. This other stuff does. So like you said, it's about a ritual, a permission, a paying into something. Years ago, I talked to a guy, because I did them, and these stop smoking seminars. They were real big in America in the 90s at the Holiday Inns and stuff. And this guy said, I'm convinced the people walk in, throw $50 on the table. If I just went, you're fixed, the same amount would quit as set through the 2-hour seminar, right?
I agree.
And there's something about that. I went through a ritual. It's all of that. And addiction also too, everybody forgets, I used to be I used to have a totally different outlook on addictions than I have now. It's probably changed about 30-40%. It's changed because the evidence I see in the real world, right? And one of the things that they've always known is if a lot of people that have an alcohol and drug problems in their 20s, about 30% will quit later in life with no intervention. They don't have to go to AA or Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, a therapist, treatment. It's almost like they age out of it. Part of that is one day they wake up at like 37 and go, I can't do this shit anymore. I can't stay out all night drinking and doing a few bumps, and my body just can't take it. So they just kind of age out. So there's that. And then, there's the people that need a little bit extra. And I think for a lot of the addictions, some of it does, and this sounds cliche, psychological, it can go back to to not just how they were raised, but their lifestyle. Because let's say a guy's a bar drinker, whether he's a professional or a blue collar, and for 15 years, every day after work, he goes to the pub, right? And has a few, right? Now he decides he needs, and the guys he drinks with at the pub are also, a lot of them are his co-workers.
Yeah.
Now, he decides to quit drinking. Who the hell is he going to hang around with? Right? Is he going to go to the pub and drink Coke? This one, there's a floor for me. I've never long-term, right? It's like, and I think one of the reasons for that is the people that are still drinking don't want you to quit, because maybe they want to quit, but they don't know how, and you quit. And so it's easier to, so in that case, things like the 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, gives you a place to learn how to make, especially someone that starts, right, or using in their teen years, that's their whole social structure. Do you know how to have fun and not drink? Do you know how to have fun and not, get a little high, or whatever it is that you do? Some of that is a training exercise, and you need some models. You have no models. I'll just tell my own story there. I didn't know people could have fun unless they had. I didn't see it growing up. Right.
All right.
So how do I learn how to have fun? Right. And so, so there's some interesting things going on. But one of the things we're seeing change in the addiction world is because of the newer generations. They are not joiners. You know, the millennials and basically people under, they're not joiners like generations before. You know, my parents, your parents, you know, after the war, you know, they joined, like my dad joined the American Legion, the VFW, you know, I went in Vietnam time, I joined the American Legion, the VFW. It was kind of that. Now our kids, my daughter, I've ever set foot other than when they visited my dad when he was still alive, because they're like, why would I want to go? They're not joiners. So let me, and that transfers to even like things like AA or NA. The younger, they might go there long enough to get clean and sober. They don't want to keep coming. So, and plus now you can get all this information like we're doing right now via, so the information you used to have to go to a meeting and sit there and get, now you can get online. So the whole treatment world is changing. Go ahead.
Let me ask you about 13 steps, okay? Because I personally believe 13 steps, you sort of AA approach, gamblers and well, they're all 13-step programs. I think
12
steps. Sorry, why am I calling it 13? Anyway,
13
step programs. I think
13 step is when you hit it.
Yeah, I think they're fundamentally flawed, because all of it is about the first thing. Hi, my name's whatever, and I'm a recovering, fill in the blank, recovering alcoholic, recovering gambler, whatever. And by the moment you say you're recovering, they would argue that that's positive, you're on the right path. I would argue that you are giving yourself a massive suggestion that you are not yet fully sorted. And that it should be our intent as a therapist to give the client the tools to be able to feel that they are in control and that they are a former alcoholic, but that is categorically saying to themselves, when they say I used to be, is categorically saying they aren't anymore, whereas saying I'm recovering is a suggestion that it's not sorted yet.
Well, I'll reframe it my way. First of all, one of the biggest things people get wrong about the 12-step program, they say it's about powerless. If you read the actual step, your power, I'll use AA, but they're all the same. They just change whatever the addiction. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Our lives had become unmanageable. That's the story. But I'm not power. It's past tense. It's not saying you're powerless right now. It's saying I was powerless. And the original idea of it was, if you put that substance in your body, you're pretty much, the game's over, right? So you're off to the races. So once you're, sober, you haven't drank for a day or two, at that moment, you're not powerless. But if you put it in your system that says we were powerless over alcohol, our lives had become unmanageable, right? And so it's past tense. Other steps, most of them are past. And and then a lot of the steps are actually kind of psychologically brilliant, like the 4th step where you do an inventory of yourself and you kind of look at your life the way it is, all this other stuff. In fact, the whole journaling psychology thing, some of it spun out of the 12-step program approach to how to make changes, because you journal. But the other thing about the identification, whether you say like, hi, I'm Will, I'm an alcoholic, or hi, I'm Will, I'm a recovering alcoholic. Well, it's, you're an expert in language too. It's what that person is attaching to it. Some of it is an identity. The same way my wife would tell somebody she's Catholic. It's just, it becomes, I would, and I'm, after all these years, I still say I'm Will, I'm an alcoholic. The reason is it's to remind me, I cannot drink successfully. All right. And so to me, it's just to remind myself,
Okay, in that context, I can totally get that, because in that context, if you don't drink alcohol now, some people would look at that, well, that means you're definitely not an alcoholic. But in the context of you knowing within yourself that you couldn't like just have one or two because it'd lead to, a total blowout, then yeah, okay, I can see in that context that it's not a negative suggestion. However, there does seem to be this element of its dependency with these things. People seem to be in these programs for life. Surely, because I know people that I've seen both as clients, but more so on a observing. I would never get involved with them on the treatment level because they're family or friends who in the past have indulged in alcohol or drugs or smoking or whatever. Now, well, with smoking, they don't smoke. Although now and again, when somebody's died, at the funeral, I have witnessed one or two of them having, a few hours that evening of weakness where they end up probably state-dependent memory, learning and behaviour related, end up having a cigarette or two, but the next day they don't, and they don't smoke again. And I know people who now will go out and they'll have, albeit they make it a habit that they will only drink, and they'll only drink maybe a couple of glasses of wine when they're out with the wife or husband having a meal in a restaurant, but they categorically won't drink at home because for them that's what feels comfortable, so they don't get. But there are people out there who can get stuff under control, aren't there, as well, is what I'm saying.
Well, and yeah, well, and also too, to me, I look at addictions that the drinking or the drug use or the gambling, the sex is a symptom of something else.
Okay.
Right? So if you just remove the symptom, whatever's driving, that's why I've seen people do this a lot. They'll quit drink and then you run into them 6 months later, they've gained 100 pounds, right? Okay. Or you see it with smokers. They just quit smoking and now they gain all this weight, right? When technically, if you understand the theology behind it, when you quit smoking, you should drop it because then your body starts processing sugars differently, and you got the energy to move. But we do know from the research that, and this gets tricky unless you're trained in it, that some people are genetically predisposed to certain problems, alcoholism or drug addiction. But when I say that, and people go, so it's genetic. Well, all a genetic predisposition means, of course, is if you don't drink, it's not going to fire off that gene. If someone's allergic to shellfish, if that's their genetic predisposition, if they don't eat shellfish, they're fine. Yeah. Right. But if it's a genetic predisposition, yeah, there's interesting concepts there. But also to people that like really get involved in like a 12-step program, I'm a very big defender of it for one reason. And I'll use a lot of friends I had when I lived in the Midwest, where it was real steel industry, auto plant, go to the bar after work, having a few beers with his friends, going to the baseball games. Now he quits drinking, right? So he's lost that group of, right? It's not the same. He doesn't want to be there because they're drinking. They don't want him there. So he's looking around. In that world, I can just tell you from being in it, just like same in the military. If you and I were hanging out and we're not talking about sports, right? Like football, whether it's American football or communist football, like you guys play in England, or soccer, or we're not talking about babes or anything like that, right? We got really, so people, men especially, they go into an AA meeting or an NA meeting, and suddenly there's guys there talking about their feelings. They're talking about being afraid. They're talking about sharing. And, how do I do that? They may be like, and I'll just tell my own story, all of a sudden, like 24, I'm like, after being in the military and doing some other, I'm like, I've never heard men talk this way. other people felt like I felt. So I've known a lot of guys that sobered up, and after about 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years, they don't really go to that many meetings. I have other friends that go a lot, especially after they retire, because they're giving back. They get to sit there and share their experience, strength, and hope with someone else. And I would say, and this sounds weird, but I would think it's pretty goddamn arrogant of me to tell that person, nope, you should stay home and watch TV. You shouldn't go to this meeting because now you're addicted to meetings. Well, I've never known anybody that got arrested for driving under the influence of Starbucks because they had too much coffee at a meeting, right? And yet, but it's a place to go and share and hang out and to give back. And we all know it's a connection issue. And in my case, I couldn't connect with my family. I couldn't connect with those old. I couldn't connect with people relying about not being able to drink successfully. That's the way I like to. And not knowing why. I could see you go out and have a couple of beers, you're fine the next day. I go out and have a couple of beers, I end up in jail because I don't stop at a couple of beers. I always say alcohol makes me break out. Doors, windows, eventually my own teeth. I break, and then I end up in handcuffs, things like that. So there's some reasons that for some people they fit quite well. And I
can agree with you there. That in terms of the support, because if you're changing your environment, obviously if you're a heroin addict, quite often there are some quite high functioning heroin addicts, but generally speaking, get into a certain social circle and don't really know anyone else. So when they are, leaving that behind, if they carry on socializing with those people, it's inevitable that they're going to relapse. They've got to change their environment, otherwise. So in that regard, the support thing, I totally agree with that. But and whatever form of addiction therapy a therapist watching this does, it is obviously important to ensure that the client's got a support network around them that takes them away from those triggers that used to bother them in the past and gives them what they need to remain as the new them. That I completely agree with. Maybe it's just a perception that I've allowed myself to fall for from TV shows and movies and stuff, that these multi-step programs are very much almost cultish. In which case I apologize for coming to that conclusion, but that's the way. But the thing is, you yourself don't run these step programs, do you? You've got other ways of helping people in your sessions and with what you do. Tell us a bit about what you do with a client. If I came with an addiction, what would you do?
Well, first I would, get how does it manifest? How, when did you start? What's going on underneath it? And I always say I help people with or without the 12-step program, right? They could go to meetings or not go to meetings. Usually, to be honest with you, especially if it's alcohol and or certain drugs, I ask them to go to several of the 12-step meetings for a couple reasons. One of the reasons is I'm checking compliance. Somebody calls me up, Will, Doc, I really need to quit this. I'll do anything. So you come in my office. Okay, Jonathan, great. Okay, we're going to do these sessions. I just need you to go to 1 or 2 AA meetings over the next week till we come back. I'm not doing that. Well, yesterday on the phone, you said you would do anything. So you lied. And I'd look people in the eye and they go, well, I'm like, either you will or you won't. I'm not saying you're going to go for life. I just want you to go there.
Okay, I like that.
And
I particularly like that concept. Nice.
Right. And they may have a false interpretation like you do. I watched, I've been going to 12-step meetings for way over, I don't even want to admit it, 38 years. And because I've been sober 35, I still go occasionally. So it drives me crazy when I see like you'll watch a TV show or a movie on what you could tell whoever wrote it had never been in a meeting. That's all, right? It's like, no, they don't work that way.
Well, full disclosure, I've never been in one of the meetings. Full disclosure for viewers. So in this regard, what William is saying is far more reliable than what I was saying before, in fairness.
Yeah, well, and it's like, so they just have you don't know what you don't know. And so you're going to default to, well, I saw this TV show where they were doing this, they were yelling at people. I'm like, well, that's not. So I asked them to go, right? And then they get a different, because this is different than what I thought. The first thing people notice when they go to a 12-step meeting, whether it's Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, I've only been to mostly AA, by the way, but all these other meetings. The one thing I can tell you that freaks people out, never been in there, is the amount of laughter.
Okay.
And the bonding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And things like that, right? And a lot of times people walk in, especially if they're just coming to see me too, they have a lot of shame, guilt, and remorse because they're not reaching out for help because this shit's going well in their life. And so when they walk to like a 12, they meet other people that have basically almost destroyed their lives with alcohol, drugs, or whatever it is. So they find out they're not alone. Even if they don't go back after a couple meetings, they know in the back of their heads, I'm not the only one fighting this battle. Because when you watch TV or movies, whether it's my country, your country, anywhere, outside of parts of Asia and the Mideast, every commercial is beer. This isn't beer, it's water, but it's a beer commercial. It's and on all the TV shows, everybody's having a drink, right? And they did the sequel, and the whole thing, shit you not. I mean, somebody told me that, and I went and watched it. I'm like all the really cool guys. One guy's named Tequila. One guy's named Scotch. And basically, it was like they were the good guys because they drank, and they were trying to take down a drug dealer. You're a hypnotist in an NLP. That was like so damn blatantly, see, I'm okay. I'm only drinking myself to death. I'm not doing drugs. So you find out you're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned self-blame, I sum up as self-blame, shame, guilt, and regret as being like barriers to people being able to say goodbye to the things that used to bother them because of that conflict that maybe, if people did say to them, why didn't you do this sooner? That can push the buttons of, yeah, why didn't I? Which is the self-blame, shame, guilt, and regret. Whereas coming to someone like your good self, at least they can go, well, I tried, but I needed the help of somebody like William. And then they can be empowered by admitting that they've had to seek help. But by the same time, it's removing that self-blame, shame, guilt, and regret. People can't push the buttons anymore. I think that's a key part of what you do.
Yeah. And also then look at like what, especially most people when they reach out for an addiction help. If they me today, I guarantee you they've been thinking about it. Well, I can't totally guarantee. I would surmise they've been thinking about this for a long time. Right? And is because we see it every day, like there's always someone that just wakes up and goes, damn it, I'm not doing this anymore. Right? They throw down the cigarettes or they put down the beer, they take out the needle, they're done. Right? And usually what can happen, like in a family dynamic, Uncle Joe just quit drinking. He didn't go to therapy. He didn't go to meetings. He just quit drinking. Why can't you? Right? Yeah. Which adds a whole different level. Well, I'm not Uncle Joe. Right? It's like, so there's that, right? So when people call, okay, and we start working, I think getting them to put down the drink, especially if they show up and they're paying and all that, they're active. I think putting down the drink is the first part. Then we can look at, why did you keep doing it when you knew it was a problem? Yeah. What was driving it? What is it fear? Is it, is it shame? Is it the imposter syndrome? Like I don't really feel like I'm a good dad. So I feel so bad about that because I don't know what I'm doing. I end up drinking. And then they find out, guess what? Almost every dad goes through that at some point because that little kid didn't have a user's manual.
Yeah.
And so then we can look at building, whether it's ego strengthening, whether it's getting rid of the fear, whether it's looking at this, whether it's just giving them the ability to have the courage to go out and make new friends and do different things. Because I still always say, you may not rise to the level of your dreams. You will always fall to the level of your peers. So if you want a better life, you need better peers, right? And so, if you want to be a successful hypnotist, you probably need to go to conferences and things like that and start hanging around with successful hypnotists, So if you want a better life, you got to hang out with different people. And some of us, because of our family of origin, or maybe because of the way we work, and that's, most we're lucky, you and I, most people, like 70% of the people, almost all of their friends are they're either family or work related. So now, if they want to change their lives, where do they get these peers, the next level up? So that's, we can help them like figure out how to do that and how to approach it.
You see, just as you said that, it makes a lot of sense. As you say that, I now see more how. I still just think there's the odd bit I don't entirely agree with, but I'm seeing more clearly how the 12-step programs are beneficial, because some people may not have a support network that they can turn to, and that will at least fill that gap.
Right. And that's why you see people like go to the 12-step program, and then after a couple of years, then their family sees them different, right? And then they don't say, well, they just begin to see you differently, right? And then it's easier. They become more supported. Sometimes it's through
because they actually believe that you've become that person now that doesn't touch the stuff, whereas they were doubting before, I guess. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And then it's kind of like in our field. I always say too, it's like someone goes to hypnosis training, right? And they learn hypnosis. How long does it take your family to begin to be comfortable with you being a hypnotist if it wasn't in your world before, right? My friend's a medical doctor, right? And it's about how he was home. He lives in Florida, and he was back where he was from. And one of his uncles, he went, I'll go check his medical right if it's okay. And one of his aunts turned to him and goes, I won't use his name, so I'll just call him, "Con, you're Billy." And he's like, he was chief of staff of a hospital for a while. It's like, but they didn't see him that way. They saw him as little Billy. They grew up in this little town that joined the Navy, so he didn't want to work in the auto plants or the coal mine, right? So, and then he became a, medic, and then went to school and became a doctor. So sometimes your family can't see you different until they finally do see you different. And so, like you say, sometimes that takes time. Oh, Jonathan doesn't drink. Didn't he used to? And they'll go, oh, it was a long time. And usually your family will go, he grew out of it, or she grew out of it, right? And you're like, that's okay. They didn't know you went to therapy or you had to work at it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Excellent. I mean, that makes complete sense. So we're getting close to the end. I mean, an hour just flies by. We've got kind of like 5-6 minutes left, and I'd like you to tell the viewers, because there's lots of thought-provoking stuff there we've covered, but I've already mentioned if they go on Amazon, they can find your books. But where should they? I will put your website address underneath this video, so when it goes out, they'll be able to click straight through. But please tell them where they should be looking for your books, what your websites are, what kind of stuff you've got coming up, so that they can look into you more, William.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've done the last couple of years, I put together a addiction protocol that people do online, right? And it's called AA Solve, just a word solve.com. And it stands for All Addiction Solved. It's not Alcohol Anonymous. It's aasolved.com. And it's basically to begin to change their thinking about drinking. And because in our culture, in my culture and in your culture, there's a lot of professions, there's a lot of people that really can't go away to treatment. Because if they do, it would ruin their career. If you're, you know, the one that always jumps out, if you're a pilot and you go to treatment, you lose your flight status.
Right. Okay.
Right. And of course, if you work in the federal government here, I'm sure they're there, and you might lose your. So would you want to go to treatment and basically be told, you know, the CIA, hey, we're glad you're sober, but you're fired because we can't use you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so there's people that might want to get help that can't quite go away to treatment or show up for treatment yet, right? So it's an online, people can do it, or they just, you know, I've had a lot of housewives do it because they don't want people to know that they were, you know, drinking 4 bottles of wine a day. So that's why I developed that program. And that's AA Solved. They can also find me at Dr. Will Horton, DrWillHorton.com. I'm redoing that site, and it has like my books and that, and other ways to get in touch with me. Because one of the interesting things that I'm excited about is what we're finding out how your brain really works, and how it's tied into every part of you, you know. That is changing how we look at, or at least myself. It's like there's a current book out I tell people they should read. It's called The Body Never Forgets. And it's about how your body encodes things like trauma, shame, guilt, and remorse, right? But especially trauma and shame. And to me, it's a fascinating subject. The reason it's a fascinating subject is shame itself was developed to keep you alive. Because for most of history, if you got shamed and you got thrown out, you did something so bad that the group, the tribe, the family, or the village threw you out. It was shame that is actually encoded into our DNA. And it's to keep you in line to develop a civilization, right? And so that's why, but it's a word that has all these powerful contexts with it, right? So that's what but now we know it actually goes down your vagus nerve, and it's
Oh, just slightly froze then.
True head thing. Oh, okay.
We're back again.
There we go. Okay.
Got basal nerve.
Yeah, it goes down, and it's a gut response. The other interesting thing, and I love talking about this, is when or any highly charged emotional event, negative or positive, your Broca's area of your brain shuts down. That's the area that develops words. It's why when you go through a supercharged emotional event, you can someone say, well, what was it like? And you'll tip over. You go with big trauma.
No, we keep buffering.
That car wreck. Even if we need to describe, you know, because I was so into my body at that time, you know, with experience, that part of my brain, blood quit flowing because it said you need to be present in this, you know, and kind of tied into the sports guys, right? Whether after a bit, they're so happy they can't put words to it. When they're playing the game, they're not thinking. That part of their brain shuts down, right? And it's the same with like when you get post-traumatic stress disorder, and you ask somebody, and that's why therapy doesn't work for post-traumatic stress. Talk therapy does not work because the people cannot put words to it because there are no words to describe it. They didn't have words in their head, so then they have to disassociate, and it's why as much as they try to say talk therapy will help post-traumatic stress, it will not. It has to be a visceral response. And with hypnosis and NLP, we can bypass some of that and get them to do some really cool stuff. to me, all that is getting fascinating. You've been around 30-something years. They talked about for 30-something years. We now have the science to say this is how it works.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think they've only just scraped the surface. Well, thank you ever so much, William, for your time. It's been a pleasure. Everybody who is watching, the links will be below the video to William's websites. As he mentioned, Dr. Will Horton, that's HORTON .com, and AA Solved, which is SOLVED, aasolved.com. But the links will be there that you can just click on when this video goes live. Please do search him out, look what he's got to offer, and bear in mind, if he's been able to share these thoughts and insights with you in just literally, we've just hit the 1 hour time slot, imagine what you can pick up from his wonderful books that are on Amazon and the programs that are on his website. So once again, thank you very much indeed, William. It's been a pleasure.